Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today's story comes from a strange rumor said to have come out of the Russian countryside. In 1989, the Soviet Union had not yet collapsed, but the crisis had already begun. The country was growing increasingly unstable and the economy was in serious trouble. A lot of families were destroyed by it, and Anton's family was no exception. After losing his job, Anton's father started drinking all day. The arguments at home, which used to happen once in a while, slowly became almost a daily event. The sound of bottles smashing on the floor, his mother's quiet crying, and his father's drunken yelling became the background noise of Anton's life. Then one day, his mother finally couldn't take it anymore. She packed a few suitcases, took 12-year-old Anton with her, and left the house that was already falling apart. They moved to the village where Anton's grandmother lived. It was a large village in the northeastern part of Tver Oblast. It wasn't lively like the city, but it wasn't exactly remote either. There was a clinic, a cultural center, and even a vocational school. From the outside, it all looked ordinary. But after moving in, Anton quickly realized the atmosphere here was completely different from the city. The way people spoke was different. The way people looked at you was different. Even the air itself seemed to carry a strange kind of pressure. Anton's grandmother quickly arranged everything for him. A few days later, he was enrolled in the local school, and on his very first day, Anton realized that life here probably wasn't going to be easy. He was shy, he spoke softly, he didn't know how to defend himself, and on top of that, he wore large glasses that made him look exactly like the kind of kid bullies would choose first. So it wasn't surprising that during recess, one boy with a nasty grin walked up to him and said that some older students wanted to have a talk. Anton was scared, but he didn't dare refuse, so he followed the boy behind the school. There was a small open area back there where a few older boys were smoking. Before Anton even got close, they were already staring at him like predators sizing up prey. One of them even spat on the ground on purpose. The moment Anton stopped in front of them, one of the boys slapped him across the face without saying a word. Then they asked him what had blown him into their village. Anton stood there trembling like a lamb surrounded by wolves. The boys exchanged a few quiet words, then finally told him this: "You're new here, and if you're new here, you have to pass a courage test. Only then do you really belong." The rest of that school day felt endless. Anton couldn't focus on anything. All he could think about was how to slip away and go home unnoticed. But because he was so distracted in class, he couldn't even recite his lesson properly, and the teacher kept him behind for a little while. By the time he finally left the school building, the older boys were already waiting outside. The sun was setting. Anton was marched forward by a group of boys, his legs feeling as soft as cotton. They passed the abandoned vocational school, and beyond it lay a stretch of forest. The woods were dense. Once the shadows of the trees closed in, the sky seemed to darken all at once. After walking for several minutes, they reached a clearing. In the middle of it was a metal oil drum buried halfway into the ground, with fire burning inside. The flames flickered and threw unsteady light across the faces around it. Near the fire barrel, more than a dozen boys were gathered in an excited circle around something. At first, Anton couldn't see what it was, but the mood alone was enough to fill him with fear. He hesitated and didn't want to go any farther, but someone shoved him hard from behind. He had no choice but to keep moving. When he finally got closer, he saw it. The group was surrounding a curly-haired boy, maybe 14 years old. The boy was clutching his stomach with both hands and rolling on the ground in so much pain that he could barely speak. And one after another, the others were kicking him. Some used their feet, some used sticks. Nobody was shouting, nobody was cheering. They were simply taking turns like they were following orders. And the person giving those orders was a tall man with a mustache. He looked like he was already in his 20s. Later, Anton learned that this man's nickname was Flea. Flea was the leader. At his command, everyone joined in, even the youngest boys. The only ones who didn't take part were the few who had brought Anton there because they stayed close to him the entire time to make sure he didn't run. Very quickly, the curly-haired boy was beaten into a bloody mess. One of his arm bones had pushed through the flesh, pale and white in the firelight. Anton turned his head away in horror, but immediately someone beside him barked, "Don't look away, watch." So Anton forced himself to keep looking. This wasn't just a fight. It wasn't ordinary bullying. It was a savage, organized punishment. From the bits of conversation around him, Anton learned that the boy's name was Yegor, and the reason he was being beaten was simple. He had betrayed some kind of oath. By then, Yegor had almost stopped struggling. Flea walked slowly over to him, hands still in his pockets, bent down and asked in a voice so calm it was almost unnatural, "Yegor, can you still hear me?" In a weak, broken voice, Yegor whispered, I'm sorry. But Flea said, "Don't say sorry to me. We're doing this for your own good. Do you think we really want to beat you? Seeing you like this hurts me even more than it hurts you. We all kept our promise. But you, Yegor, you're a coward. You betrayed the oath, put everyone in danger, and then tried to run." Yegor shook all over. His voice trembled as he said, "I wasn't running. I just wanted to get away from my stepfather." Suddenly, Flea raised his voice. "Your stepfather may be a bastard, but he is not the one who broke the oath. You did. And do you know something? Your stepfather kept his promise. Did you know he used to be one of us? He was part of the first youth group. And by the way, he's the one who told us. He said you were at the bus station." Then Flea gestured with his hand and the beating continued. By now, Yegor had completely given up. He could only lie there, groaning weakly. At some point, blood had started pouring from his mouth along with broken teeth. The grass was covered in dark splashes. In the flickering firelight, Anton felt dizzy. Everything looked unreal, like a nightmare. Then someone threw more wood into the fire. Sparks burst upward and lit the faces around the clearing. Their expressions were severe. Their mouths were shut tight. Some of them were still wearing school uniforms. Pinned to their chests were badges shaped like targets. Finally, after a while, Flea raised his hand and the beating stopped. Then he said, "Bring it here." Another tall boy walked over to a makeshift bench, dug through a broken box, and handed something to Flea. It was a small red toy fire truck. And strangely, the moment Yegor saw it, he completely broke down. "Please, no, don't, brothers, please. I swear I'll never do it again." Anton was deeply confused. Why was Yegor so terrified of a toy? But Flea gave no explanation. He just grabbed the fire truck and snapped, "Shut up. Don't act like a woman." Then he shoved the toy fire truck into Yegor's pocket, yanked him to his feet by the shoulder, and pushed him down a narrow path through the trees. Not the same path Anton had used to get there. Everyone followed. Some carried flashlights, some carried half-burnt sticks from the fire. No one spoke except for Yegor's desperate pleas. Anton was dragged along too, held tightly by two boys on either side. After walking for a while, they came to a strange structure. At first, Anton thought it was a giant chimney lying on the ground, but when he got closer, he realized it was actually a long tunnel made from huge reinforced concrete rings placed one after another. It was straight, it was deep, and it seemed to go on forever. The group kept walking along a narrow path beside the tunnel. The wind moved through the trees overhead with a low, uneasy howl. Now and then, Yegor cried or begged, but no one answered him. Anton felt sorry for him, but he didn't dare say a word. He knew that if he showed even the slightest bit of sympathy, he might be the next one on the ground. By the time Anton had counted around 40 of the concrete rings, he finally saw a small building ahead. It had no windows. It looked like some kind of abandoned utility station, and the long tunnel led straight into the wall of that little building. Anton couldn't figure out what any of this was supposed to be. Then suddenly, the metal door of the building creaked open. A dim rectangle of light spilled onto the grass. Yegor's cries stopped instantly. Flea pushed him up to the doorway and then let go. Anton was standing too far away to see what was inside, but he didn't dare move closer. Then Flea said, "Go in, Yegor." Yegor didn't move. He turned and looked around at everyone as if he was waiting for someone, anyone, to say something on his behalf. But almost everyone looked away. No one spoke. A few seconds later, Yegor muttered a curse under his breath. Then he stood there, breathing quickly, like someone psyching himself up before jumping into deep water. And finally, stumbling, he walked into the little building. The moment he entered, the door was shut from the outside. Then, almost at once, everyone around the building turned and quietly left. Some walked back along the tunnel, others disappeared into different forest paths. Very soon, only Flea remained outside, smoking, along with Anton and the two boys guarding him. One of them pointed at Anton and said, "Flea, this is the new transfer student." Flea kept staring at the closed door. Without even turning around, he exhaled smoke and said, "Hello, what's your name?" Anton's voice shook as he stammered out his name. Only then did Flea slowly turn and look him up and down. Then he said, "All right, Anton, we'll talk more another time. It's late now. Your mother will be worried. And you don't need to be afraid. We're not animals. This is necessary. One day you'll understand." Then he paused and added, "Come back Friday night, okay? Can you remember the way?" Anton answered immediately, "No, I can't remember it." Flea smiled faintly. "That's fine. Kiri will bring you." Then his tone suddenly turned cold. "But you must not tell anyone about this. Not now, not ever. You saw what happens to people who betray us." Anton nodded and quietly said he understood. Flea seemed satisfied. "Good, I can already tell you're a good kid. All right, Kiri, take him home." That night, Anton got home so late that his mother scolded him first, and then his grandmother lectured him for what felt like forever. He had no appetite for dinner. He just pushed the food around on his plate with a fork, then collapsed onto the creaking wooden bed. Outside the window, there was only moonlight and the endless sound of crickets in the grass. Everything here felt unfamiliar. There were no city streetlights, no distant traffic. Even the moon somehow looked brighter than the one he remembered from the city. But Anton couldn't sleep. The images kept replaying in his head, the firelight dancing across hard, cruel faces. Yegor beaten beyond recognition, blood running down his face, that enormous concrete tunnel, those target-shaped badges, and the strange little red toy fire truck. He felt as if he had stepped into another world, a place that still called itself a village on the surface, but underneath felt more like an asylum. Anton had heard strange stories about the countryside before, but what he had seen that day was far beyond anything he could have imagined. He tossed and turned until almost dawn before finally drifting off, and even then his sleep was restless. The next day, he expected to see police at the school, but there were none. The whole day passed and nothing happened. Yegor didn't come to school. Anton quietly asked around. Someone told him Yegor's stepfather had called in and said Yegor had pneumonia and would be staying home for a while. Anton couldn't understand why the police had never come. It seemed like Yegor's stepfather was helping cover everything up. Over the next few days, Anton lived in constant tension. No one came to bother him directly, but he always felt like someone was watching him. And in fact, Kiri really was hanging around near the school all the time, clearly keeping an eye on him to see whether he would tell a teacher. Anton, of course, said nothing. He was the new kid. Even if he told someone, why would they believe him? And worse, what if it only made things even more dangerous for him? Still, he didn't just sit there and wait. It was becoming obvious that on Friday night he would be taken back to that forest clearing, and if he couldn't avoid it, then he needed to find out what those people were actually doing. So he secretly went to Yegor's homeroom teacher and, catching her alone in the office, managed to get Yegor's home address. On Friday, Anton pretended to be sick and skipped the last 2 classes. He threw his school bag out of the bathroom window first, then climbed over the wall and left the school grounds. The moment he was outside, he ran toward the far side of the village. The farther he went, the fewer houses he saw. There were more fields, more weeds, and farther off, the skeleton of an abandoned cowshed. Finally, he stopped in front of an old house and shouted, "Yegor, are you home?" A middle-aged man in a rough shirt came out almost immediately. He stood behind the gate and stared at Anton with deep suspicion, but Anton was ready. "Hello, sir. I'm here to see Yegor. His teacher asked me to bring his homework." To make it look convincing, he even pulled a few exercise books out of his bag. The man stared at him in silence for almost a full minute. Then he nodded. "Yegor's here. Come in, boy." He opened the gate, stepped aside, and pointed toward the side of the house. "He's out back on the left. Go on." Anton entered the yard and found Yegor sitting on a bench in the shade. His arm was in a cast. His face was wrapped in bandages. He sat there like a corpse. Under the bandages, his face looked badly misshapen. The bridge of his nose bulged strangely. There were dark red bloodstains on the white cloth. At first, Yegor didn't seem to notice Anton, so Anton quietly said, "Hey, Yegor." Yegor slowly turned his head and answered with a muffled, barely understandable, "Hi." Anton was stunned. The whites of Yegor's swollen eyes were almost entirely red. Forcing himself to stay calm, Anton said, "We don't actually know each other, but I was there on Monday, in the clearing. I wanted to help you. I just couldn't. I'm sorry." Yegor listened, then replied calmly, "It's my own fault. It's fate." Anton decided not to waste time. "Flea told me to come to the forest tonight. I want to know what they're doing." Yegor didn't answer right away. He just stared at Anton for a while. Then he finally said, "Tonight there will be another ritual, and now you have to join." Anton was about to ask what he meant when footsteps sounded from behind a nearby shed. Kiri stepped out slowly, wearing the same half-smile as before. Anton instinctively turned to run, but suddenly Yegor stuck out his leg and tripped him. Anton hit the ground hard, scraping his palm on the rocks. Kiri walked up, tugged at his pant leg, crouched down, and pulled a folding knife from his pocket. He brought the blade close to Anton's face and whispered, "New kid, do you believe I could scoop your eyes out any time I want?" Angry and humiliated, Anton looked toward Yegor. But Yegor's eyes were empty again, as if whatever will he once had was already gone. Anton had no choice but to whisper, "Yes, I believe you." Kiri nodded, satisfied. "Good. You really are a good kid, and it's almost time. Let's go." This time, Anton no longer dared to run. He followed Kiri back to the forest. The bonfire in the clearing had been lit again. Its light turned the surrounding trees into tall pillars, while everything beyond them remained absolute blackness. The orange flames reflected in the treetops, making the clearing feel like some giant underground cave. The boys gathered around it looked like savages. When Flea saw Anton arrive, he motioned for him to sit on a log. It was close enough to the fire barrel that Anton could feel the heat against his knees. Little by little, the sky darkened. It felt like the whole world was shrinking, until only the fire and the people around it remained. Flea sat beside Anton, carefully carving a piece of wood with a knife. That was when Anton realized that almost everyone here was probably carrying some kind of blade, so he didn't dare look around too much, afraid they might think he was planning to run. After a while, Kiri stepped out of the darkness, leaned close to Flea, whispered something in his ear, and then disappeared again. Flea brushed the wood shavings away and set the unfinished carving aside, but he still kept the knife in his hand. Its sharpened edge flashed now and then in the firelight. Anton was too frightened to speak. Finally, Flea spoke first. "Hello, Anton. Thank you for coming." Anton forced his dry lips open and said, "I want to know why you did that to Yegor. He doesn't seem normal anymore." The moment the words left his mouth, Anton surprised even himself. But Flea didn't get angry at all. In fact, it was almost as if he had expected that question. He picked up a stick and tossed it into the fire, then said calmly, "It's more complicated than what you saw. Yegor is not reliable. He nearly ruined something very important." He looked at Anton. "I know you have a lot of questions, but we don't have much time, so I'll make you a deal. I'll answer 5 questions, honestly. After that, you have to come with me to a certain place, and once you complete a task there, you'll become one of us. Anton immediately asked, "Can I choose not to become one of you?" Flea smiled. "Good. That's your first question. Yes, of course you can. But you've already seen too much, and if you don't join us, I doubt you'll have a peaceful life here." Anton shot back, "But you forced me to come." Flea nodded. "That's true, and for that I apologize. But what's done is done, and we need people we can trust. I think you're one of them." Anton asked his second question, "Are you a cult?" Flea paused, then burst out laughing. "That's a good question. No, we're not a cult. We're just a club, a youth shooting club. Our name is The Last Line." He said the name came from the fact that this area had once been part of a final line of defense against fascists. According to him, the group belonged to the old Red October vocational school and operated under some outdated voluntary military training program. But to Anton, that explanation meant nothing. He didn't care about the club or its history. He only wanted to know why Yegor had been beaten like that. So he asked again, "Then why did you do that to him?" Flea's face darkened slightly. The wood in the fire hissed. All the low murmuring around them stopped. Everyone fell silent. Flea turned the knife thoughtfully in his hand, then said, "Because Yegor betrayed us. Someone told me he was trying to leave the village without finishing his task. He had already packed his things. He had even bought a ticket. And the person who told me was his stepfather. He may be unpleasant, but when he was younger, he was also part of this club. He understands what matters most." Then Flea added, "People here understand that what we do is more than target practice. We protect everyone in this place. Club members come and go. When one generation leaves, the next one takes over." Anton was even more confused than before. More and more, he felt that this so-called club was really just a group of lunatics hiding behind an old name. So he asked his fourth question, "What exactly is that thing in the forest? That tunnel?" Flea answered, "It's our shooting range, a tunnel shooting range. You don't see many of them anymore. Most of our training is done with air rifles now, but that tunnel is still useful. No wind, no missed shots." But again, that didn't answer the real question. So Anton pushed once more. "Then why did you do that to Yegor?" This time, Flea didn't dodge it. He said coldly, "Yegor was supposed to walk to the end of the tunnel and place the toy at the target, but he ran away before he finished." Anton froze. Then he immediately asked, "Why didn't he want to go in? Why is leaving a toy there so important? Why does someone have to walk through that dark tunnel to do it? Is this some kind of initiation ritual?" Flea smiled faintly. "Yes, leaving the toy there is very important. And in a way, yes, it is an initiation ritual, and now it's your turn." Anton wanted to ask more, but Flea stood up and cut him off. "You've asked your 5 questions. The rest of the answers, you'll have to find for yourself." Then Kiri came over and pulled Anton up from the log. Anton's ears were ringing. That conversation hadn't made things clearer at all. If anything, it had made everything feel even darker and more disturbing. Then Flea walked over and placed the carved object in Anton's hand. It was a small wooden horse. "Take this toy," Flea said. "If you do exactly what you're told, you'll prove you can be trusted. And when you're done, you can go straight home. I promise no one will bother you after that." And so, once again, Anton was led down the path toward the little building beside the tunnel. The others followed behind, whispering now and then. The beams of their flashlights wobbled through the trees like pale ghost lights. As they walked, Flea explained the rules in a steady voice. "Don't look back. Every 50 steps, look up at the ceiling once. If someone calls your name from behind you, do not answer. And if you walk for a long time without seeing any light, you must turn around and back out slowly, facing the way you came." Anton walked with his head down, sick with fear. This didn't feel like some weird initiation. It felt like he was being taken somewhere to be executed. Flea kept listing rule after rule. But Anton barely remembered any of them. They sounded too ridiculous to be spoken by normal people. And the more he thought about it, the more certain he became that these people were not normal at all. Maybe they just wanted to trick him into the tunnel and lock him inside. But before he could even think about escaping, he realized he was already standing at the door of the little building. By then, it was too late. Flea opened the door. Inside was a small room. Old lamps hung from the ceiling. The dampness had peeled large patches of paint from the walls. There were cut-out magazine pictures and gun posters still stuck up in places. The whole room looked like an office inside an abandoned workshop. A row of cabinets stood in one corner. Near the middle was a chest-high wooden counter with supports of different heights, obviously used for shooting practice. And behind that counter was a perfectly round black opening leading straight into the tunnel. That was the entrance to the underground range. The opening was about 1.5 meters across, a perfect circle, almost as if it had been drawn with a compass. Anton knew that in theory, this was just an abandoned shooting range. There shouldn't be any monster inside. But the thought of going in there alone still made his legs weak. Without asking anyone's permission, he dragged himself over to a bench and dropped onto it. He kept breathing deeply, trying to force the panic down. He told himself this: the tunnel itself might not be dangerous. The truly dangerous thing was the people outside. Just then, Flea opened one of the cabinets and pulled out a green fabric bag. He placed it beside Anton. "Anton," he said, "this is your equipment." Anton opened the bag. Inside was a flashlight, several candles, a screwdriver, some food, and a bottle of water. He looked up, confused. "Food? Why is there food in here? Isn't this tunnel only a few dozen meters long?" Flea replied, "To be exact, the tunnel was originally 80 meters long, but it's always better to be careful. There's canned food, biscuits, and water. I checked everything. And tonight the conditions are normal. You can see stars in the sky, so don't overthink it. Just take the toy to the end. When you see the target, leave it there." Then Flea reached over and flipped an old switch on the wall. Click. The sound echoed far down into the darkness. Then, somewhere deep inside the tunnel, a dim red light came on. A fat boy entered the room, moved the shooting counter away from the entrance, and quickly stepped back outside. Then Flea said, "That red light inside is left over from the old shooting days. It's not very bright. If you can't see, use the flashlight. But remember, each time you turn it on, no more than 10 seconds. After that, you have to walk in darkness for another 10 seconds. Otherwise, you'll attract attention." Anton felt a cold shiver run through him. Attract attention? Whose attention? But before he could ask anything else, someone shoved him hard from behind. He stumbled forward into the tunnel. In that instant, Anton felt as if he had been hypnotized by the tiny red light in the darkness. It no longer felt like a lamp. It felt like a blood-red sun shining from the mouth of another world. Behind him, Flea shouted, "Good luck, Anton. We'll be waiting outside." Then the metal door slammed shut. Anton was swallowed by darkness and silence. He fumbled for the flashlight and turned it on. A weak yellow beam spread across the curved floor and the walls, barely lighting more than a small patch ahead of him. He began moving forward slowly, counting in his head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then off. He kept walking in the dark, counting another 10 seconds. Then on again. That was how he moved through the tunnel. Light on, light off, light on, light off. At first, Anton thought the whole system was probably just some idiotic ritual designed to scare new members. The only point of it, he assumed, was to make them more afraid. But the farther he walked, the more he began to feel that something was wrong. First, he felt like he had already covered a decent distance, and yet the red light didn't seem much closer at all. Second, when he sped up slightly, he suddenly heard another set of footsteps behind him. That sound was just a beat or two slower than his own, as if someone behind him was following his rhythm from a short distance away. Anton froze. He almost turned around. But in that exact moment, he remembered Flea's warning. Do not look back. He forced himself to calm down. It was probably just an echo, he told himself. This was an empty concrete tunnel. Of course it would echo. So he clenched his teeth and kept walking. The dim red light ahead still flickered. Anton continued following the rule, 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off. But soon he noticed something even stranger. For just a second, the red glow ahead seemed to be blocked by something. Only for a second, but it almost made him drop the flashlight. He switched it on immediately and shined it forward. There was nothing there. Nothing except the same long concrete tunnel. Still, he had the uneasy feeling that the space around him was no longer the same as when he first entered. It felt wider. At first, he'd had to stoop a little. Now it seemed like he could stand more upright. Was that just his imagination? Anton stopped and stood still for a few seconds. Then he decided he had no choice but to keep going. But the farther he walked, the stronger his unease became. Because by now he felt sure he had already gone at least 100 meters, maybe 150. And no matter how you looked at it, he should not still be inside a tunnel that was only 80 meters long. So was Flea lying? Or was the tunnel itself getting longer? Then Anton noticed writing on the walls, and scattered stains that looked like dried blood. Most of the writing had been made with chalk. Some of it looked like it had been smeared on with fingers dipped in soot or ash. The words were crooked, desperate, childlike. They said things like, "Almost there. Don't turn around. Mom, where are you?" Anton stared at those twisted lines and felt dizzy, but he had no choice except to keep moving. Gradually, even the ceiling seemed to be getting higher. At first, he had been able to touch it easily. Now it seemed like he would have to jump just to reach it. And more writing appeared. "I feel sorry for everyone. When will this end? There is no end. No end. No end." The blood on the walls and floor also became thicker. At first, it had been only scattered stains. Now it looked like whole streams of it had once run down the concrete. Some had dried into rusty brown patches. Others looked almost fresh. The air began to fill with a strong metallic smell. Anton suddenly thought of a slaughterhouse, that heavy, warm, sweet, nauseating smell of blood. He sped up without meaning to, but he still didn't dare break the rules. He kept switching the flashlight on for 10 seconds, then off for 10. As he went deeper, the tunnel kept growing larger. The walls looked soaked in blood. The old writing that had once been readable was now partly covered by newer stains, until all that remained were frantic, overlapping marks. Anton felt a pressure building in his chest. The darkness and the smell of blood seemed to be squeezing in around him. But what terrified him most was not the blood. It was the fact that the footsteps behind him and the breathing never disappeared. They were still there, steady, not too close, not too far. That was the moment Anton truly understood something. Maybe Flea had not been trying to scare him on purpose. Maybe there really was something else in the tunnel. Then, in the next moment, Anton could no longer tell whether it was his own body trembling or the tunnel itself. Dust began falling from the seams between the concrete rings. A thick black liquid, sticky like tar, started dripping from the ceiling. Then suddenly a wind moved through the tunnel, and mixed into that wind was a long, distant sound. Anton dropped flat to the ground at once. He buried his head in his arms, pressing his forehead hard against the floor, curling in on himself like an ostrich trying to hide from danger. He tried desperately to convince himself that this was all a hallucination. He imagined that he was actually back in his grandmother's house, that his mother was in the kitchen making dinner, that she was about to call him to the table, but he couldn't make himself believe it. That hot, choking smell of blood kept slithering into his nose, reminding him again and again that this was real. He didn't know how long he lay there. Even after the shaking stopped, he still didn't dare get up immediately. Only when everything fell silent again did Anton slowly lift his head. The tunnel looked normal once more, but the darkness felt deeper than before, and the air felt heavier. After that shock, Anton realized he was suddenly exhausted. He felt hungry too. So he reached into the bag, pulled out a few biscuits, and mechanically shoved them into his mouth. The food gave him the faintest sense of safety, at least enough strength to stand again, so he kept walking. As he went deeper, the tunnel grew wider still, wide enough now that a truck could almost have driven through it. The ceiling was about 3 meters high. Anton kept moving the same way as before. 10 seconds of light, 10 seconds of darkness. Then, after a while, he felt something under his shoes, a dry, rustling sound. He aimed the flashlight downward and saw that the floor was covered in loose sheets of paper. They were children's drawings, crayon drawings, messy, childish, chaotic. Anton felt like he was losing his mind. He was too tired, too terrified. So he decided not to look at them. Instead, he started quietly humming a nursery song to himself. It was one his mother used to play for him every week when they still lived in the city. But then, in the very next second, something invisible near his ear began humming the same melody back to him. Just like the footsteps, just like the breathing, so close and yet still unseen. Anton's whole body went numb, but he didn't stop. If anything, he hummed the song louder and more clearly, almost as if he were challenging something that did not exist. The other voice hummed along for a little while. Then slowly it faded away, along with the footsteps and the breathing. Once again, Anton was alone, or at least he hoped he was. He kept moving through the endless darkness, but the red light ahead was still flickering in the far distance. Then suddenly the red glow blinked once, drifted sideways, and disappeared. Number, not drifted. Gone. It had gone out. And at the same time, the tunnel was no longer straight. There was a curve ahead now. From that moment on, Anton completely lost his sense of time. He vaguely remembered walking for what felt like hours, or maybe kilometers. At some point, he found a sour apple in the bag, ate it as he walked, and tossed the core into a crack between 2 concrete rings. That was when he noticed something else. Many of the seams between the rings were broken open, and beneath those cracks there was no dirt, no rock, only bottomless darkness. Not the darkness of emptiness. Something deeper than that. There were stars below. There were stars above. There were stars all around. As if the tunnel was not buried beneath the forest at all, but floating in some endless void. Ever since he entered, Anton had felt that something was watching him. Something vast, something heavy. Like some invisible celestial body whose mere existence was enough to crush the breath out of him. He still did not dare look back, so he kept going. And then, after some unknowable stretch of time, 4 words appeared on the wall. The well of the world. The words felt like a warning, as if they were telling him that the tunnel had no end. Despair rose inside him like floodwater. He wanted to scream, to curse, to lose his mind. But at that exact moment, a long, drawn-out moan filled the tunnel. At first, it was faint. Then it grew louder and louder, until it was almost a scream. Yet somehow he still couldn't tell where it was coming from. The dim red glow that remained overhead pulsed with that sound, brighter and darker, brighter and darker. Anton clamped his hands over his ears and shut his eyes as tightly as he could. He tried to block out that monotonous, unnatural rhythm. The sound felt maddening. He didn't know how much time passed. At some point, it almost felt as though he had fallen asleep. Then a soft crying sound woke him. Anton opened his eyes and lifted his head. About 2 meters away sat a boy. The boy was facing away from him toward the wall at the end of the tunnel. He was sitting on some kind of filthy schoolbook cover or mat stained with dried blood. His head was grotesquely large compared to his body, and strangely, the tunnel around Anton now seemed to have returned to the way it looked when he first entered. Low, narrow, almost impossible to stand up straight in. Above them hung a dusty old lamp. Directly beneath it was a target painted long ago on the wall, now mostly faded away. Toys, pencils, pieces of paper, and scraps of cloth were scattered all over the ground. Anton understood immediately. He had finally reached the end. That awful ritual, it seemed, was almost over. And oddly, once he saw the boy, Anton wasn't as terrified as he had been before, because whatever else this was, it was at least human. So he took a drink from his water bottle, forced himself to sound normal, and asked, "Hey, what's your name?" The big-headed boy trembled slightly but did not turn around. After a few seconds, in a weak and cautious voice, he asked, "Did the bad boys send you? Are you going to bully me too?" Then he started crying softly. Anton quickly said, "No, don't be scared. I'm not with them. How long have you been here?" The boy answered, "I don't know. Maybe a very, very long time. I live here. They won't let me leave." Anton asked, "Do you want to leave?" The boy was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I don't know, and it doesn't matter. And Jellyfish doesn't want to leave, so I don't leave either." "Jellyfish?" Anton said. "Who's Jellyfish?" The boy replied, "Jellyfish is my friend. It helps me chase away the bad boys, but it doesn't like visitors. You should go while it still isn't back." Anton had no desire to stay any longer than necessary. He took the little wooden horse out of his pocket and said, "This is for you. A toy. I'll leave it on the ground. Do they send people to bring you toys often?" For the first time, there was a little happiness in the boy's voice. "Yes, they do. Thank you. The horse is beautiful, and I can tell you my name. My name is Kriya. I really like toys." He said it with the seriousness of someone sharing a secret that only a friend was allowed to know. Anton answered softly, "My name is Anton. I like toys too. And books." At that, the boy turned just a little, only a little. But it was enough for Anton to see his face, and it was the kind of face that made the body recoil on instinct. His nostrils pointed upward. His lower eyelids sagged down as if they had melted. His face was covered in circular holes of different sizes. Some of them looked wet, as if blood was still seeping out. In the dim light, his face looked both deformed and corroded, as though something had been eating at it for years. Anton involuntarily sucked in a breath, and Kriya seemed to notice. His voice turned colder, not angry, but like someone trying hard to hold back another feeling. "All right, Anton, I'll remember your name. You're not a bad person, but you should leave now, because Jellyfish is coming back soon, and if it sees you, it might eat you." Anton didn't hesitate. He quickly said, "Okay," then turned and left. And what made it even stranger was this: the walk back only took a few minutes. With almost no effort at all, Anton stepped out of the tunnel. When Anton came out of the little building, Flea and all the others were still outside, waiting. After everything he had just seen, the fear inside Anton had been replaced by something stronger: anger. So the first thing he did was demand, "What did you people do? Why is that boy locked in there?" Flea looked at him. A cigarette hung between his fingers. He dropped it to the ground. There were already countless cigarette butts there, all crushed out underfoot. Then he lit another one, took a drag, and dropped that one too. Anton could tell that Flea was not calm either. Finally, Flea said, "We didn't do anything. We're only maintaining the situation as it is. Come back to the bonfire. I'll tell you what happened 14 years ago." And for the rest of that night, Flea told Anton a story. 14 years earlier, there had been a boy living in the village orphanage. His name was Kriya Yurasov. Kriya was born deformed. He had no family, no friends. According to rumor, when his mother saw him in the delivery room, she abandoned him on the spot. He suffered from an extremely rare facial deformity syndrome. Almost everyone who looked at him felt disgust or fear, but Kriya himself was simple, gentle. He smiled foolishly. He tried to make friends, and that only made the people who bullied him even crueler. At that time, the club called The Last Line already existed. One day, some of the boys in the club came up with a particularly vicious joke. They told Kriya that if he wanted to join them, he first had to prove his courage, and the way he had to prove it was by walking alone through the shooting tunnel all the way to the target at the far end. But there was one problem. Even back then, there were already strange rumors about that tunnel. People said that if you walked too deep inside, you would see terrible things. Some even claimed that people who entered never came back out. So no matter how naive Kriya was, he still refused to go inside. But that night, the boys forced him in anyway. Not long after he entered, he started screaming. Then he began running back toward the exit in panic. And in the darkness, it seemed that something else was moving with him. At first, the boys only meant it as a cruel prank. One of them fired a blank round into the darkness and laughed. Then the others started copying him. But the problem was this: not every gun was loaded with blanks. Some contained real bullets. Maybe some of them had been drinking that night. Maybe youth, stupidity, and cruelty just spun out of control all at once. Maybe they only wanted to look brave in front of the girls. No one knew. But what happened next was simple. A group of excited, half-crazed teenagers began firing wildly into the darkness of the tunnel. They enjoyed the fear. They enjoyed the screaming. And they did not realize what they had done until it was too late. Kriya screamed and cried inside that tunnel, desperately trying to make it back to the entrance. Only when he collapsed in blood and could no longer stand did the boys finally understand that they had done something unforgivable. But even then, they did not think of calling the police. They did not think of saving him. They only thought about escaping responsibility. And in the end, someone, no one remembered who, suggested locking the shooting range door. So that was what they did. They locked the door. And they left a child who had been shot, and who was not even fully dead yet, in the darkness. According to rumor, for a long time afterward, if anyone passed near that place, they could still hear muffled crying coming from inside the concrete tunnel. The orphanage did report Kriya missing, at least officially. There was a police search, but the truth was no one really wanted to find him. To many people, he was only a deformed orphan, maybe mentally disabled too. Not quite a real person in their eyes, more like some unwanted defect the world had rejected from the start. So in the end, the whole thing was buried. Quietly, carelessly, and that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. After some time passed, members of the club finally gathered enough courage to open the shooting range again. They went inside, terrified, and what they found made even less sense. Near the far end, there were a few drops of blood, but that was all. No body, no bones, no remains of any kind, nothing that should have been there. And instead of being horrified, the boys felt relieved, almost excited. They believed they had gotten away with it. Some of them even held a ridiculous little ceremony in the forest clearing and swore they would carry the secret to their graves. But after that, the real strange events began. People started hearing crying in the forest. Club members reported bizarre things during shooting practice. Some said that while aiming at the target, they suddenly saw Kriya, deformed, bloodied, running toward them through the tunnel. Others said that if there were no stars visible in the sky at night, or if the red light at the end of the tunnel began blinking in a regular pattern, then it was about to appear. Slowly, the club convinced themselves that Kriya had become something else, a monster. And then they told themselves another lie. Even if Kriya would never go to the police, his existence alone might still be a danger to the entire human race. So they made another decision: they would try to kill him again. The club began taking turns standing watch at the shooting range. Whenever the red light in the tunnel started flashing, the teenagers lined up outside the entrance just as they had 14 years before. Again and again, they fired into the darkness. Reload, shoot, reload, shoot. As if they could shatter their guilt, their fear, and their past by filling the tunnel with bullets. But months passed, then years, and Kriya still kept appearing. Later, 2 new boys joined the club and refused to believe any of the stories. They thought the older members had just been broken by years of guilt and fear. To them, Kriya was just a legend. So the 2 boys decided to walk into the tunnel themselves and prove that the so-called monster was nothing but rumor. 2 of them went in. Only one came back out, and the one who returned had gone insane. He was naked. His skin was carved with strange symbols. His hair and nails had grown absurdly long. His mouth was full of blood. And the only thing he said, over and over again, was this: Kriya likes toys. Kriya likes toys. From that point on, the rules of the club changed completely. They were no longer just guarding a secret, and they were no longer just firing into the dark. Now, every month, they drew lots. Whoever drew the marked lot had to carry a toy into the tunnel, walk all the way to the end, and leave it with Kriya. If the stars were visible in the sky that night, then usually nothing catastrophic happened. But even then, the person going in often saw things that no one could understand, things like jellyfish. According to Flea, jellyfish was a gigantic transparent thing floating in the void. Though transparent wasn't exactly the right word, it almost blended into the darkness around it. It was more like a presence, something with soft edges, rising and falling slowly in the blackness. And if you angered jellyfish inside the tunnel or failed to obey the rules learned by generations before you through blood and terror, then you might not come back out at all. Flea even gave Anton an example. 3 years earlier, an 18-year-old club member named Nikita had entered the tunnel carrying a toy. Hours passed and he did not return. When people finally went in to look for him, they found him almost entirely rotted away, little more than bones, and under his foot was a crushed toy. After hearing all of that, Anton understood something. There was no going back to being an ordinary child, not after that night. In the end, he became a member of the club. Not because he believed in them, not because he accepted Flea's talk about protecting everyone, but because he understood that he already knew too much and had seen too much. From then on, Anton kept the secret. Years passed, and by the time he finally told this story, he was already in his 40s. Later, he went to university, he got married, then divorced. Luckily, he never had children. He changed jobs several times and eventually settled in Dubna, where he became the head of a laboratory at a small high-tech company. As for Flea, Yegor, Kiri, and most of the people who had stood in that forest clearing that night, over the next 20 years, they all died one by one. Most of them died in absurd accidents related to alcohol. One drowned drunk in a river, one died in a drunken fight, one was found dead in the snow for no clear reason. Only a few who had left the village early and never returned were still alive. Anton never knew whether those deaths had anything to do with Kriya, and he never knew whether there really had been some kind of monster in that tunnel, or whether everyone involved had simply gone mad from guilt and fear. Because later, the tunnel shooting range was demolished. It no longer exists. But what happened inside it has never disappeared from Anton's dreams, especially the flickering red light, that endless dark tunnel, and the deformed boy at the end clutching his toys and crying softly. Sometimes Anton still wakes in the middle of the night, and when he does, he can still remember the smell of blood from the dream. And sometimes he can still hear another person's footsteps just behind him. Always half a beat slower than his own, always there, and never visible. So that was today's story. What do you think Anton really saw inside the tunnel? Was it truly something supernatural? Or was it nothing more than a shared nightmare, one passed down from generation to generation after a group of boys committed something unforgivable? If you enjoy stories like this, Russian village legends, forest rumors, secret organizations, and dark mysteries, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you in the next video.